All right, listeners, get ready, because today we are going on a deep dive you won't soon forget
I'm excited.
into the philosophy of time.
Oh, yeah?
We've got a really fascinating stack of articles here from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And let me tell you, these readings,
Yeah.
they are packed with mind-bending concepts.
I know.
And we're going to wrestle with questions like, could time even exist without change?
Mm.
Is time travel even logically possible?
Yeah.
And what happens to our concept of now when physics suggests there might not be a universal one?
That's a great question.
So are you ready to have your mind blown?
I am. I think so.
Okay, let's jump right in with one of the most unsettling ideas in philosophy.
Okay.
Fatalism. It's this concept that the future is completely unavoidable. It's predetermined, like a movie that's already playing out.
Yeah. It's definitely a thought-provoking concept. Imagine a world where every event,
Oh, wow.
even moral catastrophes,
But-
they're just set in stone.
Yeah.
Every choice you think you're making has
Right,
already
right.
been decided.
Okay, I can already feel that existential dread creeping in.
Oh, yeah.
But wouldn't that mean we're all just puppets
Whoa.
with no real free will?
Yeah.
What would be the point of making choices if the outcome's already fixed?
That's the challenge fatalism poses to our everyday understanding of, like, agency and responsibility.
Right.
And the classic argument for fatalism goes like this. There are true propositions about everything that could happen in the future, and every proposition is either true or false right now.
Okay.
So there must be a set of true propositions that perfectly predict the future down to the smallest detail.
So it's like saying the script for tomorrow's events is already written and we're just reading our lines.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And if those predictions are already true,
Yeah.
then nothing we do can change them. The future's locked in, and our actions are merely playing out this predetermined script.
I bet.
But as you might imagine, this argument hinges on some pretty hefty assumptions.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of room to push back on this idea of a fixed future.
There certainly is.
Yeah.
For one thing, the fatalist argument assumes that propositions about the future exist now,
Right.
which is debatable.
I would think so.
Think about it. Different times might have different sets of propositions that become relevant as those times become present.
I
To
see.
use your script analogy,
Yeah,
maybe the script for tomorrow isn't even written yet.
that makes sense. It's like saying that possibilities for the future are constantly emerging rather than being fixed from the beginning.
Right. And another challenge to fatalism comes
Uh-huh.
from this concept of an open future.
Mm.
This idea challenges the principle of bivalence,
Oh, yeah.
the assumption that every proposition is either true or false right now.
Okay.
Maybe propositions about future events that are contingent,
Right.
things that could happen but aren't guaranteed,
Yeah.
are neither true nor false at this moment.
So my decision to have tacos for dinner tonight
Right.
isn't predetermined. There's still genuine possibility, a chance for me to choose pizza instead.
Exactly.
Interesting.
That proposition about your taco craving
Well, yeah.
only becomes true or false when you make the decision.
Okay.
This idea of truth values changing over time
Yeah.
leads to a fascinating debate between tensed and tenseless propositions,
Right.
which we can get into later.
All right. I'm already intrigued.
Oh, good.
But before we dive into those tensed and tenseless waters,
Okay.
I want to circle back to the very nature of time itself.
Okay.
Does time even exist as a separate thing?
Hmm.
Or is it just a way of talking about the relationships between events?
That's a fundamental question
Yeah.
that has divided philosophers for centuries.
Right.
It leads us to the debate between reductionism and Platonism about time.
Hmm.
Imagine, if you will, a scenario
Okay.
where everything in the universe comes to a complete standstill.
Wow.
Birds frozen mid-flight,
Okay.
conversations cut off,
Yeah.
planets halted in their orbits, total stillness. Could time still exist in such a scenario, even without change?
Wow, that's a mind-boggling thought experiment.
Yeah.
I'm trying to picture this frozen universe.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's hard to grasp how time could exist without something happening.
That's the crux of the argument for reductionism,
Okay.
also known as relationism.
Right.
Thinkers like Aristotle and Leibniz
Uh,
argued that time is nothing more than the relations between events.
right.
For events, no time.
Mm,
Time, in this view, is like a measure of change,
yeah.
not an independent entity.
So, For reductionists,
Yeah.
time is a way of quantifying the differences between states of affairs,
Yeah.
rather than a thing in itself.
Exactly.
Almost like a secondary concept
Uh-huh.
derived from the primary reality of change.
Exactly.
The idea.
On the other hand, we have Platonism,
Okay.
or substantivalism,
Right.
which holds that time exists independently of events, like a pre-existing container.
Okay.
Even if that container is empty, time flows on,
Right.
regardless of what's happening within it.
I
Thinkers like Plato and Newton championed this view.
This reminds me of similar debates about space.
Mm-hmm.
Is space defined by the objects within it?
Right.
Or is it a pre-existing framework that exists even in the absence of matter?
Exactly.
As a philosopher,
Yeah.
you have to love these mind-bending analogies.
Absolutely.
And just like with space,
Mm-hmm.
the debate about time has implications for how we understand motion.
Exactly.
For substantivalists,
Mm-hmm.
absolute motion movement relative to absolute time and space
Right.
becomes a possibility.
It does.
So if I'm understanding this correctly,
Yeah.
relationists would say that my speed is only meaningful compared to something else, like
Right.
the ground or
Yeah.
another moving object.
Yeah.
But substantivalists could say there's a true speed I'm traveling at,
Right.
even in an empty universe.
You've got it.
That's interesting.
And this brings us to the arguments for and against absolute time. One argument for absolute time is the intuitive appeal
Okay.
of that empty container metaphor.
Right.
It's easy to imagine time flowing on
Right.
regardless of what's happening within it.
Right.
Additionally, some physicists, like Newton,
Uh-huh.
argued that absolute time is needed to explain certain phenomena,
Yeah.
like acceleration.
Right.
Remember Newton's bucket experiment?
Oh, yeah.
The water curves upward at the edges when the bucket spins,
Right.
suggesting motion relative to something absolute.
That's a classic example, and it definitely makes you think twice about the nature of motion.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's some pretty strong arguments against absolute time as well, right? After all, it's not like we can directly observe this container of time.
You're right. Leibniz, for instance,
Uh-huh.
argued that absolute time violates some fundamental philosophical principles,
Of-
like the principle of sufficient reason.
Hmm?
This principle states that there must be a reason
Oh,
why
wha-
things are the way they are,
Right.
rather than some other. Yeah. If absolute time exists,
Okay.
why does the universe exist now as opposed to 1 second later? If everything else is the same,
Right.
it seems arbitrary.
Right. If time is just an empty container,
Yeah.
why is the content of the universe located at this particular point in the container
Uh-huh.
rather than somewhere else? It doesn't seem like there could be a sufficient reason for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Leibniz also invoked the identity of indiscernibles,
Okay.
which states that if two things are completely indistinguishable,
Uh-huh.
they must be identical.
Right.
Imagine a universe where every event happens 1 second later than in our universe.
Okay.
If absolute time exists,
Right.
these would be two distinct universes.
I see.
But since they're essentially the same,
Mm-hmm.
just shifted in time,
Yeah.
they should be considered one and the same,
Right.
according to the identity of indiscernibles.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we have these intuitive arguments for absolute time
Right.
based on our experience of time flowing and the need to explain phenomena like acceleration.
Yeah.
But we also have philosophical objections based on reason and parsimony, like Leibniz's arguments.
Exactly.
This leaves us in a fascinating philosophical standoff.
Indeed.
And this debate about time's independence leads us to another crucial question.
Okay.
If time does exist,
Yeah.
what is its shape or structure?
Hmm.
This is where things get really visually interesting.
Okay.
I'm picturing a line representing time.
Right.
But what kind of line?
Yeah.
Straight? Curved? Does it have a beginning or an end?
Yeah, yeah.
Hold on to your hats, folks, because
Arr.
we're about to dive into the topology of time.
I'm ready. Okay.
The standard model of time depicts it as a single, straight, non-branching, continuous line
Okay.
extending infinitely in both directions.
Right.
But philosophers have raised fascinating questions about each of these features.
Of course.
Does time actually possess them,
Right.
and are they necessary or contingent?
Right.
Could time have a different structure altogether? It's mind-blowing to think that the very structure of time might be up for debate.
Yeah.
Let's start with the big one. Does time have a beginning and an end? I remember reading about Aristotle's take on this.
Yeah, Aristotle argued quite persuasively
Okay.
that time cannot have a beginning or an end. His reasoning was that a first moment
Okay.
would have to exist between an earlier and later moment, which is a contradiction.
Right.
The same logic applies to an endpoint. It's like trying to find the first number before 0. It just doesn't make sense.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It highlights the absurdity of trying to pinpoint a beginning or end
Right.
to something that seems inherently continuous.
Uh-huh.
But what about the Big Bang? Doesn't cosmology suggest a beginning to the universe?
Right.
And wouldn't that imply a beginning to time itself?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it brings us to the intersection of philosophy and physics.
Right.
While the Big Bang does suggest a beginning to the universe as we know it, it doesn't necessarily imply a beginning to time itself.
No.
There could have been an infinitely long period
Right.
of empty time before the Big Bang, or perhaps time itself came into existence with the Big Bang.
Right.
There are strong arguments on both sides.
So the origin of the universe doesn't necessarily settle the question of time's beginning.
Right.
It seems like we're left with a tantalizing mystery.
It is, yeah.
And we've only scratched the surface of time's potential topologies, right?
Right.
What are some of the other mind-bending possibilities out there?
Oh, there are plenty.
Okay.
We have multiple isolated time streams.
Okay.
Imagine separate timelines running parallel to each other,
Right.
completely unconnected.
Hmm.
Then there's branching time,
Okay.
which is often invoked in discussions of time travel or an open future,
Right.
where each choice creates a new branch in the timeline.
Yeah.
We also have the idea of a closed loop of time, where time is cyclical,
Right.
repeating itself endlessly.
I s-
And there's the possibility of time as discontinuous,
Yeah.
jumping from one moment to the next.
Right.
Or even an asymmetry to time where one direction is privileged over the other.
Wow. So we have linear time, branching time, cyclical time,
Yeah.
and a whole host of other wild configurations.
Yeah.
It seems like time's structure is much more complex and flexible than our everyday intuitions suggest.
Seems to be.
But amid all these possibilities,
Yeah.
one philosopher decided to throw a real wrench in the works
Oh.
by questioning the very reality of time. I'm talking, of course, about McTaggart's paradox.
Yes.
McTaggart's paradox,
McTaggart's paradox.
a philosophical puzzle
Yeah.
that continues to challenge and fascinate us.
Yeah.
Get ready for another mind-bending journey,
Okay.
because McTaggart presented a famous argument
Right.
that the very idea of time,
Yeah.
as we usually conceive of it,
Right.
is inherently contradictory.
Right.
So is he saying that our entire experience of time is an illusion? Are we all living in some kind of timeless matrix?
Not exactly, but he's definitely challenging a fundamental aspect of how we
Okay.
think about time.
Yeah.
He argued that our usual way of understanding time,
Right.
with its flow and distinction between past, present, and future,
Huh.
leads to logical problems.
Okay.
To understand his argument,
Yeah.
we need to distinguish between two ways of ordering events in time,
Okay.
the A series and the B series.
All right, let's break this down.
Okay.
I remember the A series involves past, present, and future.
Yes.
Those familiar categories that seem so central to our experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Events in the A series change their A properties over time.
Okay.
Something that was future becomes present and then
Right.
past. For
Right.
example, the proposition, the soccer game is tomorrow, is true today,
Right.
but it will be false tomorrow when the game is happening.
Okay.
The B series, on the other hand,
Okay.
is all about fixed relations, like earlier than, simultaneous with, and later than. These relationships don't change.
Right.
The soccer game is always later than yesterday and earlier than next week,
Right.
regardless of whether it's happening now, in the past, or in the future.
So in the B series,
Yeah.
events are fixed in relation to each other, like
Yeah.
points on a timeline.
Exactly.
While the A series captures the dynamic flow of time
Ah,
and the ever-changing nature of past, present, and future.
exactly.
Now, here's where McTaggart's argument gets really interesting.
Okay.
He argued that the B series alone isn't enough to represent time because it doesn't capture genuine change,
Right.
which he saw as essential to time.
Uh-huh.
The B series just gives us a static map of events
Yeah.
without any sense of flow or becoming.
Right.
So the B series is like a frozen snapshot of time,
Yeah.
while the A series is the movie itself with all its dynamism and unfolding.
That's a great analogy.
But McTaggart then argued that the A series leads to contradiction. A
Right.
single moment can't be both past and future,
Right.
yet every moment will be both past and future.
Exactly.
The moment you're experiencing right now
Yeah.
will eventually be in the past,
Ugh.
and it was once in the future.
Right.
Trying to resolve this by referencing further moments just creates an infinite regress of contradictions.
Right, it does.
Whoa, my head is spinning.
Yeah.
It's like a philosophical time loop
Ah.
where every attempt to fix the problem just creates another problem.
Yeah.
So What was McTaggart's ultimate point? Was he really denying the existence of time?
His argument was meant to show that the A series,
Yeah.
which seems so crucial to our concept of time,
Right.
runs into serious logical problems.
Hmm.
This doesn't necessarily mean that time doesn't exist,
Right.
but it does raise deep questions about the nature of temporal passage
Yeah.
and the coherence of our everyday understanding of time.
Yeah.
McTaggart's paradox has fueled a century of debate
Oh.
about the nature of time and whether our experience of time's flow
Yeah.
is a genuine feature of reality or an illusion created by our minds.
This sets the stage for an epic philosophical showdown.
It does.
The A theory versus the B theory.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like these two theories represent fundamentally different ways of thinking about time.
They do.
And I'm eager to delve into their details and explore their implications.
All right, let's do it. You're absolutely right. The A theory and B theory, they're like two rival teams, each with their own star players and game plan.
Right.
And as we dig into them, you'll see how these theories connect back to some of those mind-bending puzzles we've already discussed.
Right, Coach. Give me the playbook.
Okay.
What are the key differences between these two theories of time?
Well, remember our discussion about tensed versus tenseless propositions?
Yeah.
That's a crucial distinction between the A theory and the B theory.
Yeah.
B theorists argue that all change can be described using tenseless propositions and relations like before and after.
Right.
For them, time is like a dimension of space.
Right. A block universe
Yeah.
where all events are laid out like points on a map.
So it's like that frozen map analogy we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Everything's already there, past, present, and future, just existing at different points in this vast block of space-time.
Exactly. For a B
Yeah.
theorist, there's no real flow of time.
Right.
No special now.
Yeah.
Change is just variation within the block.
I see.
And our feeling of time passing is an illusion, perhaps a product of our consciousness,
Right.
or a quirk of how we perceive the world.
Okay, so no dramatic unfolding of time for the B theory.
Not really.
It's all about a fixed, unchanging reality.
Right.
What about the A theory? How do they see things differently?
A theorists insist that the present moment is metaphysically special
Okay.
and that the passage of time is a real objective feature of the universe.
Right.
They argue that at least some change requires classifying events as past, present, or future. They need tensed propositions to capture how reality is now in a way that's complete.
But different from how it was or will be.
So for A theorists, time really does flow.
It does.
And there's something unique and significant about the present moment.
Yes,
It's not just an illusion or a subjective feeling.
precisely.
And they have some compelling arguments to back up their view.
They do.
Like we do it.
For one, A theorists often appeal to our psychological experience of time's flow.
Right.
It feels like time is passing.
It does.
Like there's a real distinction between the present and the past.
Yeah.
They also point to aspects of physics that seem to support an A-series view,
Okay.
like the laws of thermodynamics, which suggest a direction to time.
Well, wait, didn't we talk about special relativity earlier?
We did.
And how it challenges the idea of a universal now.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be a problem for A theorists?
That's a sharp observation.
Yeah.
Special relativity does pose a challenge to the A theory,
Right.
but it's not necessarily a fatal blow.
Okay.
Remember, the relativity of simultaneity in special relativity involves two claims. First, simultaneity is relative to reference frames.
Right.
What's simultaneous for one observer might not be for another.
Yeah.
This claim is empirically well supported.
Mm.
Second, no reference frame is privileged.
Oh.
There's no absolute standard of simultaneity.
Right.
The second claim is more philosophical
Right.
and based on principles like parsimony.
So an A theorist could, in theory, accept the first claim about the relativity of simultaneity,
It could.
but reject the second claim that no reference frame is privileged.
Yes.
They could hold on to the idea of a special present moment, even if it's not universally agreed upon.
Exactly.
Hmm.
They could argue that there's something metaphysically special about the present moment for our reference frame,
Okay.
even if observers in other reference frames experience a different now.
Right.
Of course, this raises further philosophical questions
Yeah.
about the relationship between physics and metaphysics,
Right.
and whether we're justified in picking and choosing which aspects of physics to incorporate into our philosophical worldview.
It's a fascinating puzzle,
It is.
and it highlights the complex interplay between science and philosophy.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears for a moment and delve into another intriguing debate that these theories of time spark
Okay.
what exists in time. Do past and future things exist alongside present things? Or is only the present real?
Ah, yes.
This brings us to the realm of temporal ontology,
All does.
where we grapple with the existence of the past and the future.
Right.
We have three main contenders here: presentism, eternalism, and the growing block theory.
Okay.
All right, let's unpack these different views.
Okay.
Presentism, as the name suggests, argues that only the present moment exists, right?
Precisely.
The past is gone, the future hasn't arrived yet, and all that's real is this ever-fleeting now.
It's a radical idea,
Yeah.
but it has a certain intuitive appeal.
Right.
After all, if something isn't here now,
Yeah.
in this present moment, does it really exist?
Right.
Can we say that dinosaurs exist if they're long gone? Or that future Martian colonies exist if they haven't been built yet?
It's tempting to say that only what's immediately present is real.
Yeah.
But I imagine presentism runs into some tricky problems when it comes to talking about the past and the future, right?
Yeah, it does.
If those things don't exist, what are we even referring to when we talk about them?
That's one of the main challenges for presentism,
Right.
how to make sense of meaningful talk about non-present objects.
Right.
If Socrates and the dinosaurs don't exist, what are we talking about when we discuss them?
Mm,
Another issue is relations.
right.
We say things like, Lincoln was taller than Napoleon, but how can they be related if they don't both exist now?
Yeah.
And then there's the problem of truth makers.
Mhm.
What makes it true that dinosaurs existed
Right.
or that future Martian outposts will exist if those things aren't around now to make those propositions true?
Those are some serious objections.
They are.
It seems like presentism might have a tough time holding up under scrutiny,
Yeah.
especially when we consider all the ways we talk about and relate to the past and the future.
It definitely faces some significant challenges.
And it also runs into problems when we consider physics,
Yes.
particularly special relativity, and its challenge to the notion of a universal now.
Right.
If there's no absolute now,
Yeah.
then what's present is relative to the observer,
Uh-huh.
which really undermines the presentist's claim that only the present exists.
It really does.
Right. If what's present for me might be past or future for another observer,
Uh-huh.
then the whole idea of presentism seems to fall apart.
It does.
So if presentism is out, what are the alternatives?
Well, eternalism.
Eternalism.
Eternalism offers a very different picture of time.
Okay.
It argues that objects from all times,
Mm,
past, present, and future,
Right.
exist equally.
Okay.
Time is like a vast landscape,
Mhm.
and all points in time are equally real.
I see.
Think of it this way. It
Okay.
exists now,
Right.
even though you weren't present in 1950, right?
Okay, that analogy works for me.
Okay, good.
So eternalism avoids those awkward problems about talking about the past and the future.
It does.
Because it says those things do exist,
Right.
just at different points in time.
Exactly.
It's all part of this vast, unchanging block universe that B theorists are so fond of.
Exactly.
Eternalism fits nicely with the B theory's view of time as a dimension like space.
Uh-huh.
All moments in time are equally real,
Right.
just like all points in space are equally real.
Exactly.
But of course, eternalism has its own set of challenges.
He does.
We can discuss if you're interested.
Yeah.
I'm definitely curious about those challenges.
Okay.
But before we go there, let's touch on that third contender,
Okay.
the growing block theory.
Okay.
It's kind of a hybrid between presentism and eternalism, right?
That's right.
Okay.
The growing block theory tries to strike a balance between the two extremes. It says that past and present objects exist, but future ones don't yet. Reality is constantly expanding as new nows are added to the block.
So it's like time is a constantly growing line with the present moment at the leading edge
Yes.
and the past solidifying behind it.
Precisely.
It sounds like a promising compromise.
It does.
But I imagine it also faces its own set of challenges, right?
It does.
What are some of the issues philosophers have raised with the growing block theory?
One challenge is explaining exactly how this growing of the block happens.
Right.
What are the mechanisms by which new moments are added to reality?
Yeah.
And is there a clear boundary between the present, which exists,
Right.
and the future, which doesn't yet exist?
Right.
Another issue is that the growing block theory seems to privilege the present moment in a way that might be difficult to justify.
Right.
If the past and present exist equally, why does the future get left out? These are just a few of the questions that philosophers continue to debate.
It's fascinating how each of these theories about what exists in time
Yeah.
has its own strengths and weaknesses.
It does.
It really highlights the complexity of these philosophical puzzles.
It does.
But let's move on to another crucial question that emerges from these discussions about time and existence.
Okay.
How do things persist over time. Are we the same person we were yesterday, or are we constantly changing? How does a single object maintain its identity through time?
Excellent question. Think of it this way. The static theory is all about a fixed, unchanging block universe. It's like a giant four-dimensional sculpture where every event, past, present, and future, is already laid out, eternally coexisting.
So it's like that frozen map analogy again, but on a cosmic scale.
Yes,
Everything's already there, and there's no real flow or passage of time, just different points in space-time, like coordinates on a map.
exactly. And the static theory typically aligns with other ideas we've discussed. Eternalism, all moments in time exist equally. Four-dimensionalism, objects persist through time by having temporal parts and a tenseless view of propositions. Truth values don't change over time.
Okay, so the static theory is all about fixity, timelessness, and a block universe. Yeah. What about the dynamic theory? What's their take on the nature of time?
The dynamic theory, in contrast, sees time as fundamentally unlike space. It embraces the reality of temporal passage, that feeling we have of time flowing, of a moving now that separates the past from the future.
So for dynamic theory fans, our experience of time passing isn't just an illusion. It reflects something real and fundamental about the universe.
Precisely, and they often argue that presentism or the growing block theory offer a more accurate picture of time than eternalism. After all, it feels like the past is gone, the future is open, and only the present moment is truly real and vibrant.
Right, the static theory with its block universe seems to make the past and future just as real as the present, which feels a bit counterintuitive. But if time is really flowing, doesn't that raise questions about what's driving that flow? What's making time move forward?
That's a great question, and it leads to all sorts of fascinating debates about the nature of causation agency and the direction of time. Some dynamic theory supporters appeal to the idea of a moving spotlight to illustrate how the present moment progresses through time.
Ah, yes, that classic metaphor. It's like a spotlight shining on the present with the past fading into darkness behind and the future still shrouded in shadow.
Exactly. But even some dynamic theory supporters caution that the moving spotlight metaphor can be misleading because it might tempt us to think of time as a fourth dimension, similar to space, which they want to avoid.
So how do dynamic theory supporters explain the passage of time without relying on that spatialized view? What's doing the moving in their view?
That's a topic of ongoing debate. Some appeal to a fundamental primitive notion of becoming or temporal passage that can't be reduced to anything else. Others try to ground the flow of time in certain physical processes, like the increase in entropy or in the experience of conscious beings. It's a rich and complex area of philosophical inquiry.
Speaking of rich and complex, this whole discussion of a dynamic present and a flowing time makes me think about time travel. Is it just a fantasy dreamed up by science fiction writers, or could it actually be possible, at least in theory?
Time travel is one of those topics that pushes the boundaries of our imagination and our understanding of reality, and it's a place where philosophy and physics really intersect.
Okay, let's break this down. I'm guessing there's a difference between whether time travel is physically possible, meaning allowed by the laws of nature, and whether it's logically possible, meaning free from contradictions.
You've got it. Whether time travel is physically possible is ultimately a question for physicists to answer. They're the ones exploring things like wormholes, black holes, and other exotic phenomena that might allow for bending or warping space-time in ways that could permit time travel. But philosophers are interested in whether the very concept of time travel makes sense, whether it's logically coherent.
So even if our current physics doesn't allow for time travel, it might still be possible, in principle at least, if it doesn't violate any fundamental laws of logic.
Exactly, but that's where things get tricky because there are some famous arguments against the logical possibility of time travel. The most well-known is the grandfather paradox, which highlights the potential for contradictions in causal loops.
Yes, the classic time travel conundrum. Remind me how the grandfather paradox works. It's been a while since I've pondered the intricacies of time travel logic.
Imagine you build a time machine, travel back in time, and accidentally, or perhaps intentionally, depending on how your week is going to, kill your grandfather before your father is conceived. This seems to create a logical contradiction. If your grandfather died before your father was born, you wouldn't exist to travel back in time in the first place. It's a causal loop that seems to unravel the very fabric of reality.
Okay, I see the paradox. You're essentially causing an event that prevents your own existence, which is a mind-boggling contradiction. It's like a self-defeating bootstrap paradox where something comes from nothing.
Precisely. And this paradox has been used to argue that time travel is inherently incoherent, at least if we assume that causes must precede their effects and that we can't change the past in ways that undermine our own existence.
It's a powerful argument, but I can't help but wonder if there are ways to escape the grandfather paradox. After all, science fiction writers could come up with all sorts of clever solutions like parallel universes or self-healing timelines.
They certainly have, and some philosophers have explored those ideas as well, proposing that time travel might involve branching timelines or alternate universes where changes to the past create new divergent realities. This way, you could kill your grandfather in an alternate timeline without erasing your own existence in the original timeline.
It's mind-bending stuff. But it's intriguing to think that these paradoxes might point to a deeper, more complex understanding of time itself.
Hmm.
Maybe time isn't as simple and straightforward as we tend to assume.
That's a great point. These paradoxes force us to confront the limits of our intuitions about time and causation. They challenge us to think more creatively and expansively about the nature of reality itself.
This whole discussion of time travel and its paradoxes has really highlighted the close relationship between time and physics.
Yeah.
We can't ignore what science tells us about the nature of reality, including time, if we want to develop a coherent philosophical understanding of these concepts.
Absolutely. Physics provides crucial insights into the nature of time, and any philosophical theory of time must be compatible with our best scientific understanding. As we've seen, special relativity, with its concept of the relativity of simultaneity, has had a profound impact on our understanding of time, challenging the notion of a universal now and forcing us to reconsider the relationship between time and space.
Right, special relativity really shook things up in the world of philosophy of time, especially for those who favored presentism or the A theory. But it's not the only area of physics that has implications for our understanding of time.
Not at all. General relativity, with its description of gravity as a curvature of spacetime, has also led to fascinating new ways of thinking about time. And quantum mechanics, with its strange and counterintuitive laws governing the subatomic world, has raised further questions about the nature of time and its relationship to the quantum realm.
It sounds like physics is constantly throwing new curveballs at our philosophical theories of time.
It certainly keeps things interesting. Two other big questions that physics poses for philosophy of time are the arrow of time and the possibility of emergent time. Remember, the arrow of time refers to the fact that time seems to flow in one direction from past to future.
Right. We see this in everyday life. Eggs break, but they don't unbreak. Cream mixes into coffee, but it doesn't unmix. There's a clear directionality to these processes. But is this arrow of time a fundamental feature of the universe, or is it just a consequence of something else?
That's the debate. Some physicists and philosophers believe that the arrow of time is fundamental, baked into the very fabric of the universe. Others argue that it might emerge from more basic symmetrical laws, perhaps related to the increase in entropy or the expansion of the universe. It's a puzzle that we're still trying to piece together.
And what about emergent time? That sounds even more mysterious.
This is where things get really mind-blowing. Emergent time is an idea that has come out of attempts to unify quantum mechanics and general relativity in theories like quantum gravity. Some physicists suggest that at the most fundamental level of reality, time might not exist at all. Instead, time might emerge from a more basic, timeless reality. It's a radical and challenging idea, but it's one that some physicists are taking seriously.
So time itself might not be a basic ingredient of the universe, but rather something that emerges from a deeper timeless level. That's a wild thought. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about reality.
It certainly does, and it highlights the fact that our understanding of time is still evolving both scientifically and philosophically. We're constantly uncovering new mysteries and refining our theories. Who knows what new insights await us in the future?
Speaking of the future, this deep dive into the philosophy of time has raised all sorts of new questions for me, and I'm sure our listeners are feeling the same way. It's been an incredible journey exploring everything from fatalism and the shape of time to McTaggart's paradox, time travel, and the implications of physics. We've covered so much ground, and I'm still processing it all.
It's been a pleasure discussing these ideas with you, and it's a reminder that philosophy of time is a vibrant and exciting field full of deep questions and ongoing debates.
I want to thank you, dear listener, for prompting this fascinating exploration. I hope it sparked some new thoughts and questions for you, and perhaps even a sense of wonder about the nature of time itself. What stood out to you the most? What new ideas are you grappling with?
And as we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with one final thought-provoking question. If time is emergent, as some physicists suggest, what does that say about the nature of reality itself? Is reality ultimately timeless? And if so, what does that mean for our understanding of ourselves, our place in the universe, and the meaning of existence? It's a question worth pondering, a question that might lead us to even deeper insights about the universe and our place within it.
It certainly is, and it's a reminder that the exploration of time, both scientifically and philosophically, is far from over. There are always more mysteries to unravel, more insights to gain, and more questions to ask. Until next time, keep those philosophical gears turning.